snappy drivers to ever whirl their wheels in the wacky races, competing for the title of the world's wackiest racer. The cars are approaching the starting line. First is the Turbo Terrific, driven by Peter Perfect. Next, Rufus Roughcut and Sawtooth in the Buzz Wagon. Maneuvering for position is the Army Surplus Special. Right behind is the Ant Hill Mob in their bulletproof bombs. And there's ingenious inventor, Pat Pendy in his converter car. Oh, and here's the lovely Penelope Pitstop, the glamour gal of the gas pedal. Next, we have the Bouldermobile with the Slag Brothers, Rock and Gravel. Lurching along is the creepy Coupe with the gruesome twosome, and right on their tail is the Red Max. And there's the Arkansas Chugabug with Luke and Blubber Bear. Sneaking along last is that mean machine with those double-dealing do-batters, Dick Dastardly and his sidekick, Muttley. And even now, they're up to some dirty trick, and they're off to a standing start. And why not? They've been chained to a post by shifty Dick Dastardly, who shifts into the wrong gear. And away they go on the way out wacky races.
That's right, folks. It's time for the Wacky Races. This is a Paco and Haldan Commander themed deck that I've made for a relatively cheap budget. It's coming in around €100. The idea of it was inspired by the classic 60s cartoon, The Wacky Races. And we've got a very fun, well, as fun as Paco and Haldan can be. I know it can make some people mad with how it steals cards off the top, but we have a little bit more going on than just that. So, Paco and Haldan are our commanders. They obviously work well together for stealing cards off the top of people's libraries and using them for our advantage. Paco also makes itself really big, which is a good win con of just hitting people for a lot of commander damage, hitting people for a lot of damage in general. For our purposes, Haldan is our Dick Dastardly, and Paco is Muttley. And they drive, over here, the Imposter Mech. The mean machine, if you will. Imposter Mech was chosen because, of course, you have to have Dick Dastardly and Muttley have an imposter car. They're always up to some no-good schemes. We'll come back to the rest of these vehicles that you see over here on the right in just a second, but I want to talk about the non-themed cards that are in the deck. These were built for a budget, pretty casual sort of table. That's why we have a lot of very cheap, maybe some would say overcosted or, not very powerful effects like, Rampant Growth and Farseek and Commander Sphere. This is completely adaptable to your own needs, your own power level, whatever your playgroup likes to play with. For example, my online playgroup does not like to play with Soul Ring, so instead I've replaced it with Wayfarer's Bauble, because that also provides us some ramp and, it's not a terrible card. In terms of lands, we have a lot of pretty cheap lands. I think the most expensive lands are the Battlemon Commander lands, like Training Center and Spire Garden and Rejuvenating Springs. Rejuvenating Springs not even that expensive. But just by taking out these three Battlebond lands, you can reduce the cost of the deck from 100 quid down to 75. There's a couple of other cards like Itali that are somewhat expensive now. This copy of Noxious Revival is coming in at €6-7. You could take these out, replace them with whatever you want, and you'd have a very good cheap deck for 50 quid, even less. In terms of lands, it's a lot of very, very cheap lands. I really like the landscape cycle from Modern Horizons 3. Just being able to cycle it, really good. It taps for colorless as well. You're not stuck like some other sort of fetch lands. Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Frontier Bivouac, all cheap color fixing 3-color lands. The Battlebond lands and the likes of Rockfall Vale and Dreamer Cascade that come in untapped most of the time if you're playing in a pretty casual play group where you get to live past turn 4, turn 5. You'll be fine. In terms of actual utility lands, Kessig Wolfrun is obviously a way to pump a load of mana into Paco and swing for a big lethal swing because it gives it trample as well. Reliquary Tower, really good for a deck that can draw a huge burst of cards like Return of the Wild Speaker, etc. And Rogue's Passage, one of the fairest cards in Magic. 5 mana effectively to give something unblockable, but when the unblockable thing is a ginormous commander, In terms of draw, a lot of the very standard cheap draw spells: Brainstorm, Frantic Search, Ponder, Preordain in blue, Faithless Looting in red, Explore, Harmonize, Return of the Wild Speaker in green. Brainstorm probably the best of these because we can put stuff back from the top of our deck that we don't want in our hand so that we can get it off of Paco later. Frantic Search, of course, lets us untap some lands. You could play some of the taps for 2 lands, like Is It Boilerworks, if you wanted in your land section, so that you can maybe net an extra mana off of a Frantic Search. Harmonize 4 mana for 3 cards, not a bad deal. Ponder and Preordain let you stack the top of your deck for a Paco swing, and Return of the Wild Speaker can just net you a bunch of cards really quickly with Paco. It seems like a lot of the theming is around swinging with Paco. That's not necessarily the case. As you'll see later, there are other things that we can do. In terms of protection for Paco or any of our other bits, we've gone with some really cheap cards. Tameo Safekeeping and Gaia's Gifter, single target. Give it Hexproof, give it Indestructible till end of turn. Swiftfoot Boots, just a classic protection spell. Aqueous Form, kind of a protection spell in that it gives it unblockable, so you don't just die to a random Death Touch creature. You also get to scry 1 when it attacks, so you can stack that on top of the Paco trigger, so you can, oh, you see you have a land on top, oh, we'll put it on bottom, see if we get something better. Not much to be said. You could spring for more expensive cards like Heroic Intervention and a lot of more counter magic if you really wanted. This is built to be a pretty budget, pretty low power deck. Not low power, but like a fun, casual themed deck around the Wacky Races. In terms of ramp, probably playing a little too much ramp, if I'm being honest, but I like to play a lot of ramp. We're playing a 5 mana commander that really wants to be out as fast as possible, so plenty of 1 and 2 and 3 drop ramp is needed. Arcane Signet, Commander Sphere, the 3 coloured talismans, and Wayfarer's Bauble, some classic pieces of artifact ramp. We have a couple of artifact matters cards because we're playing a lot of vehicles, as you might have guessed from the Wacky Races. But also that, Sacred Tribe Elder, Rampant Growth, Farseek, Explorer, Birds of Paradise, just classic pieces of ramp. Explorer is a good card because not only does it draw us a card, it gets us an extra land drop, which we're already playing a couple of extra land drop cards, and getting to play extra lands off of Paco is always nice if you are hitting a lot of lands off of the top of people's decks. In terms of removal, again, a lot of pretty standard removal: Beast Within, Return to Nature, Nature's Claim, Rapid Hybridization, Reality Shift, Blasphemous Act, Vandal Blast, Decimate. Probably not the best card in the world if we're being honest, but you know, it's not that bad. Nature's Claim and Return to Nature maybe feels a little redundant if you're not in like an artifact or enchantment heavy pod, but just the extra utility on Return to Nature of being able to hit something from the graveyard is nice. Temporal Spring, probably the most interesting one, not one you really see in like standard commander games, but really strong with Paco because spinning something back to the top of a person's library and getting it off of Paco is kind of like a 2-for-1 removal and theft spell. For 3 mana, it is sorcery speed, which is not that good, but you know, it's a fun little card for our commander to use. The other one I want to talk about then is Noxious Revival, because for 2 life and instant speed you can steal anything that's in someone's graveyard with Paco. Before we get into the pilots and their vehicles, the racers, the last 2 I want to talk about are Start Your Engines and Overpowering Attack. Start Your Engines is just here because it's thematically appropriate. Of course, we're going to start our engines, we're in a race. Overpowering Attack, meanwhile, for 3 mana, because we're always swinging with our commander if we can, gets you an extra combat and potentially up to 4 extra 1/1 counters on Paco. That's really good. Okay, so next up we have our racers and their vehicles. So first up, as in the intro, we have the Turbo Terrific, driven by Peter Perfect. This is the Deluxe Dragster and Speedway Fanatic. Deluxe Dragster, another sort of stealing things card. So kind of fits with our commander. Also, it looks like his car. Speedway Fanatic, giving vehicles haste, is really good in this deck where we're playing quite a number of vehicles. Overall, just, you know, very fair, very fun cards. Next up is Rufus Roughcut and Sawtooth in the Buzzwagon. Down here we have Eska's Chariot, Giant Beaver, and Wolfgar. I'm going to level with you guys. Giant Beaver is the only legal beaver card in Magic. There is one more, which is Eager Beaver, which is not loading for some reason, which is a 3-mana green creature that, when it enters, untaps target permanent. If your playgroup is okay with that sort of ridiculously strong effect of 3 mana to untap a permanent, go for it. Otherwise, Eager Beaver kind of works because you're saddling it. It's kind of like a vehicle. Eska's Chariot is our stand-in for the Buzzwagon because I like the card. Wolfgar, meanwhile, is a pretty key card for our strategy. It is a 4/4 for 5 mana with melee, but it doubles attacking triggers of triggered abilities. So it works with itself, making itself a 6/6 when it swings. Also, it works with Paco. So you swing, you get a trigger for Paco to exile the top card of everyone's library. And then Wolfgar makes it trigger again, so you get another card and potentially up to 8 1/1 counters off of one swing with Paco. Really strong. Maneuvering for position then is the Army Surplus Special with our 2 pilots. So Mizium Tank is there because it is a tank. That's the main reason. It's not that poor in the strategy. When you cast a non-creature, it becomes a artifact creature and it gets +1/+1. It's got crew 1, it's 3 mana. Really, it's there because it's a tank. Magda, meanwhile, is the first card of our treasure theme. We've got a little bit of a treasure theme going on. It also can sack 5 treasures to go search up any vehicle, which is pretty nice for our strategy. It's kind of the only tutor we have in the deck. Hanger Scrounger, meanwhile, lets us kind of loot every turn. Rummaging, but, you know, it's seeing more cards per turn. You can also give it to something like Paco for when it swings. You can discard a card, draw a card, then exile if you know what's on top, and you kind of say, oh, well, I'd actually rather have that in hand than putting it in exile where everyone can see it. Right behind them is the Anthill Mob in their Bulletproof Bomb. So, continuing our treasure theme, we've got Horde Hauler as the Bulletproof Bomb, which lets us create a massive amount of treasures for use with Magda. So, here we start to see our theme coming together. Professional Facebreaker and Black Market Tycoon are stand-ins for our mob and their leader. So Professional Facebreaker, we can also use the treasures to exile, and we have a couple of casting from exile mattress cards like Nalvesioning that we'll come to later. Of course, we're casting from exile with Haldan a lot of the time. Black Market Tycoon, meanwhile, can make us treasures. Now, it does deal us damage if we have treasures, but I'm sure we can find a way to use them before they deal too much damage to us. Right behind them is the Converticar with Professor Pat Pending. So here we have the Mech Titan Core and Psy Master Thopterist. Psy gets us some extra creature tokens whenever we cast an artifact, and since we have so many vehicles, we're going to have artifacts quite a lot of the time. Mech Titan Core, of course, it's the Converticar. It converts from Mech Titan Core to being the Mech Titan. We're also going to have quite a few vehicles on board. Maybe we don't have that many pilots, but we can turn them into a 10/10 with, let's see, Flying, Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, and Haste. That's all colours. I feel like that's a pretty strong card. Next up we have Penelope Pitstop in, yes, that is the real name of this card, the Compact Pussycat. Azusa. Azusa lets us play extra lands, 2 extra lands on each of our turns. We're going to be hitting lands with Paco. That's just the nature of how commander decks are built. They play a lot of lands a lot of the time, especially in casual pods. I feel like something like Azusa lets us pump out mana really fast for pumping into something like a Kessig Wolf Run, so we can hit people for lethal damage. Fleetwheel Cruiser is here because it looks most like her car. That's really the only reason. It's a 5/3 with Trample and Haste. It's fine. Next up we have the Bouldermobile Gilded Assault Cart with the Slag Brothers, Mina and Den. Mina and Den, of course, another card that lets us play additional lands. We can also bounce lands back to give something trample, something like a really large Paco. Gilded Assault Cart is here because it is a mine cart and it looks like the Bouldermobile. You can also sack treasures to get it back, so that's another use for all of our treasure generators. It's there. You can replace it if you really want. Please take these ideas and use them for whatever you want, by the way. Don't feel like you have to use a list that you see online exactly as it is. Think about some other cards that you like to play. I'm playing quite a few cards in here that I just like. Lurching along then in the creepy coupe, we have the gruesome twosome of Enthusiastic Mechanaut and Nelfejny in the Honeymoon Hearse. You'll notice we have one extra card in here that I'll come back to in a second. Honeymoon Hearse. You can just tap 2 untapped creatures to have it become an artifact creature until end of turn. It's a 5/5 for 3 mana. We have a couple of small creatures that we don't mind tapping, like Enthusiastic Mechanaut, which makes all of our vehicles cheaper. Haldan, we don't care about tapping that much. Nalfejny, meanwhile, is, like Wolfgar, a critical part of our game plan. Because we're casting from exile so much, we want to be copying everything that we cast. You get double the value off of all of your removal spells, off of your draw spells. Even anything that you cast, any permanents, they become doubled and they get hasted at the end of turn. It's really strong. Now it is 6 mana, but we can pump out quite a lot of mana between all the treasures we're generating and the extra lands we're dropping, so it's not undoable. The other card here is a Tali, which represents the dragon that comes out from the creepy coupe in almost every episode of the Wacky Races, as far as I know. Itali, of course, a just insane card. Gets you 4 pieces of value no matter what. You get them for free. You can turn it into a ginormous thing if you really want. We're not abusing it by making copies of it or anything like that, but just a really fun card. You could play the OG Itali if you wanted to massively decrease the budget. You know, this version of Itali is €10. The OG Itali is probably 10 cents at this stage. The Crimson Hay Baler with the red max. So Weatherlight here is our stand-in for the Crimson Hay Baler, and Reckless Racer is the red max. Reckless Racer, another one like Hanger's Grandeur, only it doesn't give it to something else that lets you rummage through. It's got First Strike, which maybe matters, but just having a doubler for getting to get extra cards off the top of your deck and get through your deck quicker is always nice. Weatherlight is nice because we can crew it up pretty easily with 3 power. Reckless Racer is 2 power, and you know, Haldan is 1, so that makes 3 right there. We have quite a few 3/3s, 3/4s, 4/4s. You get to dig through your deck for more vehicles. You get to see more of your deck all the time. Finally then, we have the Arkansas Chugabug, which is Cultivator's Caravan, with Luke and Blubber Bear, which is Savvy Trader and Doc Orlock. So Cultivator's Caravan, another piece of ramp, so that's kind of why I say we're maybe playing a bit too much ramp. But more ramp in a Commander game, especially one with Paco. You can never have too much mana because you're always going to be able to cast things that you have exiled. It also becomes a 5/5 just for crew 3, so it's a decent blocker if you need to turn a 3 power thing into a 5 power thing. Savvy Trader lets you get back a permanent, so say you cast a Tali, it dies, you exile it with Savvy Trader, you get another Itali. It also costs 1 less because Savvy Trader reduces all of our costs for anything other than the hand by 1. Here we start to see some of the more Exile Matters cards. Savvy Trader, of course, letting us reduce cost by 1, but Doc Orlock reduces it by 2. We're not doing too much casting from Graveyard. I think Faithless Looting is pretty much the only other card that lets us do so. But we will be casting a lot from Exile, and reducing all those costs by 2 or even 3 can really make a difference, especially when we can use mana of any colour to cast them with Haldan. So that's the deck. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. And yeah, try it out. See how it goes. I found in quite a few games that sometimes it can run out of creatures to crew up all the vehicles. But that's in testing, whereas in reality when you're swinging with Paco you get 4 things rather than 1 thing, so you can see a lot more of a varied strategy. It kind of scales well with the power of the table. You never know what you're going to hit off the top of someone else's deck, whether it's a board wipe or whether it's just a value 1/1. It can be quite fun to see what other people are playing. Give it a go. Let me know how it goes in the comments below. and I'll see you soon for another sort of deck that is many decks. You'll see what's happening when I reveal all in a little while.